Hey there. If you're a frequent listener to our show, you already know that our show is brought to you by our friends over at Artillery Sports. But what you may not know is that Artillery Sports helps athletes of all types win on and off the course and court. They do this by selling quality, durable, and precision manufactured sports equipment that keeps you in the game, while also using a portion of the profits to provide the funding needed to care for our nation's veterans. With Artillery Sports, it's more than just a game. So head over to artillerysports.com today to buy the quality equipment you need to keep you in the game and to help our nation's veterans at the same time. That's artillerysports.com. Make sure you head on over there today. Oh, and use the code DOCFIRST to get 10% off your first order. I'm your host, Christian Taylor, and a documentary filmmaker myself. Today, I'm joined with my partners in crime at Documentary First, Todd Anderson and David Patterson. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
It's really great to have you here. Now, David and Todd were here a couple of weeks ago, so we could talk about our experience with our recent theatrical release of The Girl Who Wore Freedom. So this is part of a two-part conversation, and we're just so glad for you guys to come back. Let me, first I want you to introduce yourselves again really quickly and just tell who you are on our team. Then I'll recap a little bit about our last conversation, and we'll dive into what we're going to talk about this week. So David, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm still David Patterson from the last podcast. I'm a producer on The Girl Who Wore Freedom. I've been working alongside this team for well over 8 months, I guess, 8 or 9 months, working on the film much longer, but working with Todd on the theatrical distribution since, I guess, January, February. So I'm a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker going on almost 20 years now, and this is my fourth documentary, but the one I like the most.
Oh, thank you. All right, that's awesome. You can also find him on IMDb. He's the producer of The Bridge to Terabithia. That's his an amazing story. You can look him up all about that. So anyway, Todd, your turn. You're up.
Yes, hi, I'm Todd Anderson. I've been working with the team on this documentary for the last 9 months or so. It is it's my favorite documentary that I've worked on so far. It's also the only one. So I don't have as deep a history in the entertainment industry, but background of 30 plus years in automotive and focus on sales and business aspects of business, and have been involved working with Christian and her team, again focused on how we make this a successful business and focus on sales.
Yeah, it goes to show you really that sales is sales. And that's what I told Todd when he first decided to come on board. He was a little reticent because he didn't know the film industry. And I said, well, teach you what you got to know. Sales is sales. It's all the same. It's just a different product. And there are tweaks that he's had to learn. And we're going to talk about those in just a minute. Now, if you haven't listened to part one of this conversation with the three of us, you should go back and listen, because what we were talking about is our limited theatrical release that we did this summer. It's 2024, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And we thought that this would be a great year to do our theatrical release. We'd never done this before. This was the brainchild of David Patterson. He's just been driving us along. He does really believe in this film and thinks that everybody should see it. He also really thinks that this film needs to not only break even, but make money, because he believes that it is that good. So we are so grateful for that. And he picked this monkey up and put it on his back, and he's been carrying us across the finish line. So in that first episode, you heard about all of that, how he got the idea and, the list that he had that sort of vaulted us into talking to theaters, the tools that he used in order to find different emails, and just the techniques that we used in order to get theaters to talk to us. You heard about, getting 100 different screening or theaters, over, 300 screenings in 30 different cities, and kind of how we did that. Now, today, we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into exactly, the machinations of how we kept track of everything. And really, Todd was the master of this. And, we didn't really know exactly how crucial Todd's role was going to be until we got neck deep in everything. We did know that his job was sales, and we knew we wanted him to go out and to make sales. In this instance, that tended to be more David. I think David was the front man, going out, talking to the theaters, and really, roping them in, and then turning them over to me and to Todd, where I would be the filmmaker. I would explain how we would distribute the film, and what assets we had. And then Todd would make sure that it was distributed. But then, Todd, you realized you needed to do more than just that. As all of these emails began flying around, and David, I mean, how many emails do you think that we were sending around?
I think we looked at it with initially the theatrical outreach, those theaters and stuff. It was about 500, 600, and that did not include our marketing emails, which went into 3 or 4,000. So I think
Yeah.
about 500 emails went out to theaters and theater entities and film festivals and such that could show the film.
Yeah. So it was a lot of emails, because it wasn't just an initial email, it was lots of follow up emails. And so keeping track of all of that between the three of us, who also had regular lives and regular things going on, started to become very confusing. So, Todd, why don't you talk about, your experience as you're jumping into this, not really knowing anything, and trying to figure out your role in all of this, and sort of what your expertise that you brought to this team, how it helped us.
Yeah, we had a big list of potential sales contacts that David had within the theatrical area, whether it was actual theaters we were contacting, or film societies, or producers and so forth. We had many emails going out to different people, and then of course many of them we didn't get a response. So we sent out a second one, or we sent out a third one. In some cases, we did get feedback though, and I realized right away we were going to need to keep track of this. We had an initial list of contacts with contact information, and then I started to grow that spreadsheet, basically, with who we've sent it to, who responded, who all was copied on the emails, dates and action items and so forth, and then. We had a lot of different timelines with everybody. Some cases they get back to us right away. They were interested in doing it, and then they'd ask us to contact them in a month or something. So we had to make sure we had something out there to remind us in a month from then to give them a call. We had a number of them that kind of kept us at arm's distance for a while. Didn't give us any answers. If they did, they had some questions. And it was just something where we needed to keep track of it. And I think between the three of us, since we were all kind of covering whatever we needed to as far as answering them, and we also kind of used each other to generate the sale, if you will, as far as mentioning the other person as somebody who will contact them about getting them the deliverables, um, or other items that we were providing. We could kind of bounce it back between the three of us. But it also became very easy to get confused with where we left off with those folks. What did we give them? What didn't we? What was the agreement? Was there an agreement? And so, yeah, we had to keep everything documented, and then that just continued. Once we did get the sales with different theaters, then we had to determine, okay, how were we going to share the film with them? What were the deliverables? In a lot of cases, those theaters didn't know exactly, or at least the folks that we were talking to didn't necessarily know if they needed a hard drive, for example, or if they could download from online. We found in the end that roughly 3/4 of all the theaters were able to handle the online downloads, and so that was much quicker. It was much more flexible for them, and so if they had a system set up where they could do that, they could do so and feel comfortable that they've got it, and make a backup even if they needed to, and make as many, handle all the theaters. Um, in the situations where we had hard drives required, that was a whole other mess. But we had a number of things to keep track of, as far as where we stood in the discussions, and what was next, and what else was missing from the agreement, basically, that we needed to get. As far as the agreements go, we found out quickly that it didn't seem that anybody was working with formal contracts. Everything was being done by email. So we had to keep good track of where all the emails were, and be able to reference back to those. So it was just a matter of a tracking spreadsheet that turned into a bigger and bigger spreadsheet as we went along,
If
and
I can
but
hop in
the
there,
tracking
Todd, real
was
quick.
quite important.
If I can hop in there, Todd, real quick. What I had briefly talked about in our first one was we were going after these mom and pop theater companies, which had like 5 or 6 theaters, but each theater had like 10 or 12, screens. So these guys that we were talking to, or I reached out to, really weren't the big professionals. They were the people that ran the theater, but not the projector.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how it sounded. I would make the initial introductions. I'm the producer. They were the owner. And then when Todd would step in and go, okay, so what do you need? They're like, well, I don't know. They're like, because we don't normally do it this way. They usually have a film buyer, and sometimes they would connect us with the film buyer, but then the film buyer didn't know what the demand was. So there was that extra layer of Todd being able to track down literally the person at the theater to say, what do you need? Because everyone else we asked had no idea. And that may not seem like a big deal, but when you lose 2 weeks over the right people figuring out exactly what you need, and we have to move these drives, and we were switching them out. And again, Todd was in charge of that, knowing when went out and when one would come back. We were losing valuable time just figuring out what they needed.
Yeah, let me clarify what he's talking about there. And the reason we're going into this kind of detail for those of you that are listening is most people listening to this podcast are really interested in leveling up. We are creatives. We are focused on filmmaking and wanting to get our film out there. And so the business part of things, oftentimes we aren't, the most knowledgeable about. The details kind of slip through the cracks. And I think that people like Todd, we all can use, right? And so learning these certain details and how to keep track of them are really important. I would recommend everybody gets a Todd on your team, because that is really super important. But what David is talking about is that every theater is set up in a specific way in general, right? There's an owner, then there is a manager, then there are, interns or day shift employees, but usually there is a technical person that runs the projectors. And the projectors, typically they're different in every theater. Some of them are older than other ones, and they take different files. And so only the technical person knows what kind of file they need and how to get it from us and get it into the projector. And so when you make contact with the theater, you need to learn to talk to that technical person right away and ask them, can you take this film from a download link? That is complicated because these are big files. Most theaters do need a DCP file, which is a complicated, very large file that the projectors need in order to play your film. And so it takes a long time to transfer. And so theaters need to be able to have that bandwidth, and people need to know how to handle that and to take it from, the cloud into a drive and then put it into their projector. So if you're just talking to an employee or a manager and they don't understand the technicality of it, I will tell you that people that are focused on the day-to-day business of running a theater, concession sales, or slotting movie times, or opening the doors, they're not really concerned with this part of it, the technical part of it. And so when we would send them an email and they would say, oh yeah, we'd love to show your movie, and they think the deal is done, they're done. but then tracking down that person to figure out how we get the movie there. That's what David is talking about. So the key lesson here is to ask for that and identify that technical person right away. Because as David said, we would lose 2 weeks or so getting to that technical person. And what that does is slow your deliverable down. And the reason that you need to get them that file right away is because they need to test that DCP. And that testing time is super important. You need to give yourselves, at least, I would say 4 weeks. If you have a specific time when you want your movie to play, you need to give yourself 4 weeks, because let's say it doesn't work. And, we had, I don't know how many, times did a theater say, hey, we can't play your file, or, hey, this drive doesn't work. It happened. Even though we had brand new drives, it happened. And so then we had to have the time to send them another drive and try again and figure something else out. And then the second drive or the second time, that had to be tested. So if you don't give yourself margin and you miss that air date, you've then lost that sale. So that kind of margin, understanding those technical dates, that's super important. And that is why Todd tracking these things was crucial. And you said something before, Todd, about how we kind of all used each other, in our different roles. Another thing that we did is we used each other when we weren't getting responses, because there were so many times we were not getting responses. And so we would CC each other on the emails all the time. And so when somebody wouldn't answer David, we would talk among each other, and Todd would say, hey, you know what? We wrote a letter on this date. They said they would get back to us on this date. We still haven't heard from them. Christian, can you chime in? Would you reach out? So it's not David the same time, responding over and over. And we would make sure to do that. But we would need to have a Todd, counting all of those dates from those emails, from hundreds of different theaters that we were reaching out to.
And part of a business strategy actually was also multiple CCs, even some people that weren't really related to what we were doing, but with the documentary first email. Because people, when they see 8 people on an email, they think, well, maybe I should respond to this. It's just, they think they might get in trouble if they don't. They'll ignore one person, maybe 2 people. But the idea is if enough people are on the email, that person will go, okay, I should probably respond to this one, out of fear of getting in trouble.
Yeah. And I just think it would have been so easy for us. It began to be overwhelming. There were times when we were getting so many answers or replies, or we weren't getting them and we needed them, that I just wanted to throw up my hands, because I was so confused with where we were with each and every company. Because like you said, we had a lot of people that were so hard to pin down. They would give us oh, yes, we would love to do it. I mean, right away, we would get some that were, oh, yes, we would love to do it. And then it wasn't until weeks before we were supposed to show that they were finally committing. And so it was very difficult not to lose track of that in the middle of all the chaos that was going on. And so Todd's email, Todd was essential. And so the tools that we used, just so everybody knows, we used a lot of different tools in order to run our, mobile theater company, 2024 theater company, because Todd is in New Jersey, David's in New York, I'm here in Chicago. We have been using Google Drive, and so we have a shared drive where we do keep this. David has got this. Todd has this email booking tracker that we were all a part of. So every time a company was contacted, he would put that name in, the email, the phone number, and then all of the other data would begin. When we sent an email, who responded, when they said, were they a yes, no, were they, or will contact us later? Do they need a drive? All of that. And then he would continue to keep track of that all the way through the end of the project. So, David, Todd, what was the hardest thing for you?
Yeah, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that I don't think we quite knew all of the steps that it was going to take to get to the end. Also, so some of that we had to figure out all along the way exactly what the deliverables were. I wasn't clear on, for example, what different formats they could accept, and unfortunately, a lot of times we'd be talking to a film buyer that. Wasn't quite sure what that theater could accept either. And so in some cases, we had to talk to several people before, in some cases, until we got to the right person who might know what, the right way to handle it. But even just being able to track it, I think, we kind of figured it out day to day as to what's important, what do we need to be able to have tracked. Um, how are they going to pay us? How, what is the agreement? Is it a one-time payment? Is it a revenue sharing agreement? Um, we weren't exactly sure what the business model would be in each of these cases. So, as we had success with one, we'd use it against the next, and so on. And looking back, I think there were probably a number of things that we would have lined up right up front, and I think several lessons learned that we probably would have done differently, and I think we would have known better what parts of the tracker were going to be important and which parts weren't.
Yeah, David, you primarily handled the deal making, and there were things that we did know up front, right? You knew the basic general rule, okay, that a film usually is a 50-50 split. So you went in, you had an idea of what the general rule was. I had an idea. I know that theaters, in order to play a film, neither need a Blu-ray, they need a DVD, they need an MP4, or they need a DCP file, or they need a DCP file from a download link, or a hard drive. I knew those things. But the way that theaters work, like you said, Todd, they sometimes people have no idea what they need until you finally find out the right person. So we did find that out in the deal making too. David, you had this general idea, but as things went along, you had to tweak your methods. You had to tweak the deal making. Sometimes people wanted to do things differently or untraditionally because our film was older, or because they didn't think the audience would come, or because it was already streaming. So talk to us about the deal making that you had to deal with.
Right. Well, I guess a good comparison is the fisherman. I sort of baited the hook. My bait was that I was a professional producer who had produced some very big, successful films, but also some successful documentaries. This was something that would interest them, especially their community, because they had a certain number of veterans in their community. And once we were able to get the hook in them, that's basically then I would pass them on to Todd and Christian to land them. And what land them was Todd was usually the guy that introduced the numbers, like the 50-50, and then also talk about BORs, which we'll talk about it, but that's box office reports. And then also Christian would be on it because she would be involved with the deliverables because she knew the most language about it. But it also showed that we had a team. It wasn't like, hey, show my movie. It's literally we had a company that was in charge of this. And so my assignment was really the introductions, and then Todd and Christian was, for the contracts and deliverables. And then we also had a marketing team, which pretty much was us, but then a couple other people. When we got behind schedule with some of these people, we would say, hey, we're getting pressure from our marketing team to nail down these dates and make sure we can get the deliverables to you and back. And so I think at times it sounded like we had a really big company, but it really was a very, very small company. No pay, all volunteer, all hard work. But we wanted the other side to think that this is something we do all the time. We do this,
Yeah.
reach out, we get our shows done at theaters, and it's no big deal. And yeah, 50-50. For a documentary to demand 50-50 from a box office is pretty, unusual to say the least. That's, the big movies, the big Hollywood movies do a 50-50 split. But for this little independent company, but the vast majority took that bait. And we did have some that said, no, it has to be 65-35 or 60-40. There were a few of those, but the vast majority were 50-50. And I think
Yeah, and David, I do think though you're deflecting a little because you were the one in the beginning that brokered the deal. You were the one that knew, um, what they would take, or at least you played like you did,
I played
and
with it.
right, and you said this is what we want, and you were negotiating that deal. And if they gave pushback, you would give all the reasons why they should do our deal. And once you settled on the deal, then you would turn them over to Todd for all the specifics. And Todd was the one to make sure that they agreed to that deal and they followed through with all the deliverables. Now, you mentioned the BORs. I do think we tipped our hand several times that we didn't know what we were doing. And one of them is when somebody said, okay, well, when it's over, we'll send you a BOR. And we're like, what's a BOR? It was the same thing when somebody said, I'm at CinemaCon, and we were all like, what's CinemaCon? Like, there were times where we were completely clueless during this endeavor, and we were like, oh no, they're going to know that we don't know what we're doing. But we learned. So a BOR is a box office report. And the way that this kind of does work generically is that you make a deal with a theater to show your film. You have an agreement for what the revenue share is going to be. And then you have to trust them because they're used to doing it this way. They will sell the tickets. And then at the end, they will generate a BOR for you. And they will show you the BOR. It's usually a printout that they will email you. Sometimes they will send you a hard copy, and they will show you how many tickets were sold. And then they will show you, your cut of that. And typically, most of ours were a check. Some of them were direct deposits, but most of them were a check. And that is how business is done. And like Todd said, I mean, maybe we had one contract, but the majority of them, it was all email. We would ask people, do we need to have a contract? And the answer was no. I mean, I can't believe that's how it's always done or typically done. That just seems weird, but I don't know. Maybe it is.
Basically an electronic handshake. Basically, it's like, yeah, I promised this. You had the email, so let's move forward. And
Yeah.
it's
I think the
okay.
big studios might have attorneys that would advise them to have
Yes.
better contracts than we did, but we don't have any attorneys on the team, so
True.
we didn't
True.
bother.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I want to point out here is we're going through all of this because this is not typical. What we did is very unusual. Most independent filmmakers don't get a theatrical release at all. Sometimes they choose to four-wall, meaning they will rent a theater because they want to be, qualify for an award, an Academy Award or something like that, or they just want to show their friends. So they'll rent a theater for 3 days or 4 days, and that will be their quote unquote theatrical release. So the way that we did this is extremely unusual, but I do think it is a very helpful pattern for filmmakers if they want to do their own theatrical release. When we got distribution, we decided that we were going to cut out our theatrical rights. And we did that initially because I wanted to do events. I wanted to do events in different places, because I knew I could. But it so happened that you had this idea and we were going to be able to do this in theaters. But I think you have to be motivated to do it. And I think you have to look at your film and figure out, how can my film help a community? Why would a community want to watch my film? And how can I convince a movie theater to give up X amount of days of a Hollywood film, in this particular theater to screen my film? And then you have to promise with them to help market the film to get people in the seats. And so if you are wanting to do a theatrical release or a limited theatrical release for your film, this is a good model for you, but it is not an easy one, right, David? I mean, it is not an easy one.
It is. Anyone listening to this going, oh, I can do this myself. No, you can't. You cannot. It's a team effort. You need so many people to work with you on this. And if you made a movie with a bunch of people, those bunch of people need to work with you to take it to this next level. No one can do this on their own. And
No.
again, Christian was giving me a lot of credit. In a lot of respects, I was the wizard behind the curtain. I was pretending that we had all this stuff and promising that we would deliver it in respects to marketing and stuff like that, which I believe we did, but I didn't know completely if we would be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
I knew we would pull it
I
off.
know. I was hearing you write things. I was watching you write things the whole time. And I was like, I can't believe he's promising that. Like, how are we going to do that? Like, who's going to do this? Like, we don't have anybody on our team. And I remember just thinking, like, who does he, I was just so confused, but I thought, well, okay, we'll just see how it goes. But David is a writer and he is the wizard behind a screen and he was just trying to make the sale. And ultimately, David, your writing and your ideas came to fruition, but I think it's because you set this bar for us to reach and you said, we're going to do this. And then you pushed that ball down the field and made us do it,
Again, I don't, if you want to say I was the quarterback, the football was the movie and I needed everyone to carry it to the side or catch it or stuff like that. It really was. There's no way I could have done it myself. And again, going back when we said BOR, well, just one person asked one of the 100 contacts what a BOR was. So it's not like we were embarrassing ourselves to everyone. It was just with one person. And that happened with a bunch of the technical terms. Either someone go, I'm not familiar with that term, or we would go Google it before we went back to that company because then we knew what the terms were. So again, it was a lot of Wizard of the Oz where we looked like we knew everything that was going on and we were all powerful. And but a lot of it was running on the fly and figuring it out as we went.
Yeah. Todd, is this close to other sales jobs? I mean, I said all along, sales is sales. If you've done it in the automotive office or automotive, sector, you can do it here. Was I right?
There are similarities and there are some differences, and obviously we didn't have a whole system set up, an infrastructure set up to be able to work directly with the customers and with the suppliers. For example, we didn't have existing business, for example, in this realm. So some of it is you're trying to feel your way through it by talking to the customers about what they need and what we can provide and so forth. At the root of all sales, though, it is the same, it is the same structure as far as you've got deliverables, you've got customers, you've got agreements you need to have in place. You're tracking issues, you're tracking activities every which way. So there's a lot of it that's still the same. But yeah, it's a little frustrating when there's nobody sitting next to you that's already gone through this or knows which buttons to go hit for whatever needs to be done next. So
yeah, and I just think you're right. We sort of made the mold as we were going forward, or building the airplane as we were trying to fly it, I think, for sure. And it is, I think one of the ways that it is like any other sales job is it did come down to relationships. And David, I do think that's where both of you were very good, because after the initial response, we entered into a relationship with these people that we were trying to make the sale with, because they'll say, oh, I'm going to this place. I'll get back to you when I come back. And all of a sudden, right then, you're in this relationship with this person. Are you going to follow up with them? Are they going to follow up with you? Are you going to, how are you going to get them to respond to you? And what kind of rapport are you developing with them, as you go along this process? We had several where we had phone calls or we had visual, meetings. And when you developed those relationships, I think, made better sales for sure. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly, I think, important in the sales.
Even in emails, you could interpret people's attitudes, and sometimes we did do the good cop, bad cop type stuff.
We did.
with some of the people that were, I'm not going to say more difficult, but just ignoring us or not getting back to us. There was one or two that were kind of difficult and kind of rude, and we puffed out our chest, but in the end, like when it came to splitting the profits, we sort of backed down to agree because we felt it was far more important to get it in their theater than to lose it over a distribution split of the money.
Right.
Going into this, we knew we would not make millions, but the objective was not to lose anything. And
Right.
that was the objective. So when one company said it's going to have to be a 60-40 split, we went, okay. And then we said, how about you give 5% of your box office to a local charity, a veterans charity? And I think 2 or 3 of them went, okay, as long as you guys don't get it, as long as you guys don't get the money. We're like, okay,
Right.
we'll do that then. So,
Right.
Again, appealing to everybody's focus on, this is for the veteran community. This is for this is to improve upon everybody's understanding of the veteran experience.
Yeah. So when you guys think back to everything that you personally did in your own lane, what would you do differently? David, we'll go with you first.
Well, we had discussed this internally, not here. It was once we got a commitment, just reach out to the communities, all the contacts in the communities. Once we got an even yes, okay, we're going to do it. We had waited to launch our marketing once we knew that they could download the materials, and we lost weeks over that. And so we really didn't notify most of the communities until less than 2 weeks before the screening was. And that really left us no time to really get an impact in those communities. But we were trying to play it safe. I kept telling Todd, let me know, give me the green light once the download is, so then we can send out all our marketing materials. Mm-hmm. And looking back, we should have just sent out the marketing materials. And if it didn't work out and they couldn't download it, so be it. It was no skin off our nose. That's my biggest regret.
Yeah, I think what David is talking about is that we were ready to give the theater the deliverable very, very early on. For the most part, we had our film ready, but the theaters drag their feet, to commit in the first place. And then they were late telling us how to give them the drive or how they wanted it. And then they were late telling us if it played or not, like getting to test it. And so we didn't want to begin advertising it till we knew it actually worked and they could play it. And then the next problem was they didn't want to give us a time or a day. So it was very difficult to say, hey, this is going to be playing at your theater on this day and this time if the theater wasn't telling us. So that was really rough. And that was, you're right. I mean, that was hard because we were only marketing that at the very last minute.
Yeah, we were hoping to give everybody, detail 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time, but these theaters, in many cases, don't have those times set till the week before. And in a lot of cases, they're not even receiving the hard drives until the week before, if you will. And so in a lot of cases, we had a few cases where we sent hard drives like 3 weeks before they were going to show it, and they waited until the day before to give it a shot. And we had one situation where they couldn't get it to work, and it wasn't like we could snap our fingers and have something for them the next day. So it didn't work out. So
they wanted us to overnight it at an astronomical amount, and we're like, we will never make that money back in ticket sales, so we're just going to not do it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson learned for me was the issue with the hard drives. The fact that the hard drives are so difficult to. It took time to ship them. It took a lot of cost to ship them, and I think we found the theaters had more difficulty working with the hard drives than they did with just an online link. And I think when we started out, we thought, hey, there's 90% of these theaters are going to need a hard drive shipped to them. And I think in the end, from what I had looked at, it was maybe 25%, a quarter of them needed the hard drive. And I honestly think that they'll figure it out in the next few months that they can download and not need the hard drive. So I think the lesson learned is, somehow we would have wanted to convince them that they don't need hard drives, or perhaps charge them in some way. And I don't know that the current the way that the industry works right now, I don't know that they're used to getting charged for something like that. But I think in some respects we'd want them to understand it's painful to work with a hard drive and to wait till the last minute shipping these things around, and it's costly, especially with the size of the business that we were looking at. And I think down the road we'd say, with these hard drives, we've got some that we can ship around, but we need them shipped back right away. And maybe we need to charge them a nominal fee up front to make sure they understand that there's some pain in using these.
Yeah, so let me elaborate a little bit more so listeners understand what he's talking about. Again, I told you before, theaters have different ways that they can play your film, and it really does depend on how old the projectors are in the theaters and how old the theater is in general, and the knowledge of the IT person in the theater. And so the older the theaters are, they're going to use Blu-rays, or they're going to use a DCP file. And like I said before, those have to be sent on a hard drive, typically. The other option for a DCP file is a download link that does take a long time. And the theater has to be able to have the bandwidth and know how to handle a download link in order for that to happen. I was the one that originally said, in all the theaters that I have been in, they all want a DCP file. And the way that it has happened over the course of this whole time that I've been with The Girl Who Wore Freedom, I had to go to a DCP distributor, or, manufacturer, and he manufactured a DCP file for me. And then he did have the ability to put that on several drives. And this even happened during the film festival. Film festivals will tell you, I need a DCP file in order to play your film at our festival. And so it's part of your costs for film festivals. And so, I think the upfront cost is anywhere from $500 to $1,000, depending on who is doing the manufacturing. And then for them to send it out, the drive out, it's a rental fee plus the shipping fee to ship out and return. So that ended up being $75 to $100, depending on where we were shipping, a cost for that drive. And in the end, that cost us about $4,000 for those shipping of the drives. And that, it wasn't only just costly, like Todd said, it cost so many issues. Todd had to track things incessantly, like it was madness, because not only were you tracking things, daily, there were issues that were out of our control. So if a drive ended up at the theater, there are kids opening the mail, and maybe they don't open the package, or maybe they open the package and they put the drive somewhere and nobody can find it. Or then they put it into the projector and they lose the package and don't have the return slip, or they misplaced the drive, or one drive came back with all this gunk and goo on it, which is now, the drive is unusable. It's like $200 to a $250 drive. And it was happening so much that this DCP distributor only had so many drives. So we ended up having to buy 6 more drives to the tune of like $1,200 or something like that. So that whole drive experience led us to decide, going forward, we're either going to probably not do any theaters that need a DCP drive, or we are going to do that deliverables ourselves, or we are going to tell the theater, you need to pay extra for this. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think theaters are used to doing that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we found out is there is a service called Deluxe. A lot of theaters use this service, Deluxe. Deluxe is a DCP distributor. They are enormous. They are a standard bearer in the industry, which I've come to learn. And it costs about $3,000 for your film to be ingested into their system. Once your film is ingested into their system, they have the ability to deliver your film by satellite to some theaters, or by online links to others, or by drives to others. And so having Deluxe handle that is probably a good way to go if you're going to do deliverables. And I would certainly look into that if I were going to do this again. But at that time, and when we were to start, that $3,000 sounded like a lot of money. And I had no idea that we would ever spend over that $3,000 in doing this distribution the way that we did it. So
Well,
definitely.
that's my fault. That's my fault because
What?
I said we're going to do like 50 theaters, and we ended up doing over 100 cities and over 300 screenings, which it snowballed. You know,
Yeah.
we had like 25, we had 30 before. We're like, okay, but then people coming back. Yes, we want it, and that's when we had like a come to Jesus meeting where we're all nervous about it, and I said, you know, we'll find the money to pay for the drives and stuff like that because I think it's worth it, and it was. But there was that moment where, especially Christian, was just like terrified that we're not going to be able to get this done. And luckily, we had the calming guy. I don't know how the screens are split up, but he's in the middle between us on the screen I'm looking at. Todd was like, I think we can do this. He was always the calm guy going, I'm pretty sure we can do this. And he, again, with his split streets and all the different things, and he was following his files. He's like, so far, I think you kept saying, I'm comfortable. We can get all this done. He kept saying that. And so I'm Scottish, so I'm never comfortable. But Todd kept saying, I'm comfortable with where we're at. And so that would usually calm Christian and I down, saying, okay, we can pull this off. Now, Todd, were you lying or were you always fairly comfortable where you were?
I was quite comfortable, even though I am also Scottish. I was quite comfortable. I had it all mapped out as far as when everything was going to go out and when it was going to come back. But if I had known how difficult it was to get those hard drives back from some places, I would have been more worried up front. And so getting those extra drives, we may still made it, but not by much, and we wouldn't have been able to sleep the last few nights, I think, as we would have been shipping those back and forth. But yeah, it became a much bigger headache than anything else we were working on, I think.
Well, and I have new information that I haven't even shared with you guys, but I did talk to our DCP supplier. His name is James Thayer. He works for Seek First Productions in Nashville. And I told him, I was like, hey, dude, you were the one that made out on this project. Like, you cleaned out because you made the most money from us. And he's like, well, truthfully. And I was like, what? He's like, I kind of broke even on this deal. And I was like, what are you talking about? And, you know, in the end, he really wasn't charging us a ton. It was a ton of work for him. And so he really did just break even. You know, and then the interesting thing is he said to me, you know, he asked us in our email, should I send these drives back to you? Because he has 6 of our drives. And I said, you know, James, going forward, I think, you know, we are going to try to do the download link, but, you know, do you want to keep the drives and then going forward, now we don't need to rent the drives. We just need to pay for shipping. He's like, you know, I think I'm going to send you the drives back and let you guys do the distribution because it's a lot, and I'll teach you how to do it. And he's right. I mean, it is a lot. You're going to UPS a lot, and especially when they're passing in the night when you're trying to do a lot of different theaters. And the other thing that he told me was he took these drives, and typically they're in maybe a Pelican case or they're in something more structured. But when he bought our 6 drives, they were in a box, and he would put them in a bubble wrap because he didn't feel like the box was secure enough, the box that he bought them in. So he would put them in a bubble wrap package, and he felt like, okay, it's going to be secure enough. And he put the return envelope and everything in that package. Well, for a bunch of them, they didn't return them in the bubble envelope. So, you know, you can't you can't force them to do what they're supposed to do. And I think, again, that's a big problem. You're working with theaters where it's probably high schooler kids who don't really know what they're doing and don't really care. And I mean, in the end, we ended up losing a drive.
We just assumed they would return it. They would not throw it in a shoebox and just throw it back to us and
Yeah,
hanged up.
that should have definitely been in our emails. Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially if like that one drive came back with all that goo and gunk on it. I mean, come on now. You ruined our drive and now we got to buy a new one. And the other thing I was going to say is UPS lost a drive. And so James, when he sent the drive to the theater, he put $300 worth of insurance on it because the drives cost $250. Well, when the theater sent it back, they only put $100 of insurance on it. And so we only get $100 in place to replace that drive.
Which confuses me because James is the one that paid for the return envelope. So I would assume he would have paid for the insurance also.
Well, with this one, that was the one where the theater also lost the envelope. That's another thing that happened. That theater completely lost the envelope. And so they returned it in whatever they returned it in. They had to buy their own thing, their own label, and then they bought only $100 worth of insurance. And then the drive was lost, and we only get $100 check to replace the drive. So now we're down to 5 drives,
I don't know. UPS worked back through James on that one, so we'll have to talk about that one.
Yeah, so anyway, that's a lot of lessons learned in this theatrical distribution. I do hope this has been helpful to some people. One last thing, we're going to have one more segment here. We have my son, Josh Taylor, who is a math major at Wabash College, doing data analytics on this theatrical release. There is so much data involved. We figured we want to look at it a little bit more closely and see if there is anything that we can learn. What can we learn by looking at how we did across the different states during different days, different times? What can we learn? And so we're inputting all the data from the BORs, as well as just the different states that we have and different theater chains that we have. And we're going to ask a bunch of questions. And when Josh gets that data analytics report finished, we're going to come back and kind of tell the results and go over those and see how we did. So that is going to be our report next time we get together. So I just want to say thank you guys. This has been great having you on. This has been a great experiment. I do hope people learn. I think it is a good thing for independent filmmakers to do. It is another way for people to see your film, and it is another way for you to make money. We did make money on this deal. Absolutely made money on this deal, even though it cost us money. And that is the cost of doing business. You got to spend money to make money, but you do have to learn how to spend that money wisely. And we learned the hard way that next time we need to, spend less money. And we can do that, I think, and still make more money.
That's the plan.
We did not spend money like going to college for this. This was life college on learning distribution 101. So you can spend a ton of money learning this from a professor, or you can do it the way we did it and not only learn it, but we actually made $1 or $2. So
yeah. Yep, absolutely. And truthfully, we have some other screenings that are coming up that people said they wanted to screen it, but they weren't able to screen it during the June 5th and 6th. So we do have other deals that we still need to make in the future. And now we will do things a little bit differently, won't we?
absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, you have been listening to Documentary First, where we believe everybody has a story to tell, and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.